Okay, for an example, I'm using this GMC truck. You can do this with pretty much any vehicle. I'm going to check the alignment, and when I say that, I actually really mean toe in, because I'm not checking the complete alignment, only the toe in. Okay, now to do this, my main tools are going to be a jack, a couple pieces of 4x4, a good tape measure, and a piece of chalk. Okay? Okay, now if you think you have an alignment problem, there's one quick check you can do. You can lay your hand flat on your tire and rub across and rub back. And if it's towed in or towed out excessively, what will happen is the edge of these tread right here, one side will be rounded over real smooth, and the other side will actually get an edge on it, you know, and it'll feel sharp. That's what they're calling feather edging. So if you rub your hand over one way and it's smooth and come back the other way and it's catching you and you feel them little edges, then you probably have a toe in, toe out problem. Now, one thing to keep in mind, always look at your tires before you go rubbing on them, because if you have a severe alignment issue or your tires are wore out and you got metal cords coming through them, you don't want to be rubbing your hand on them. All right. Okay, now what we're going to do before we start, we want to get on a straight piece of road and we want to drive a little bit, and we want to make sure the steering wheel is fairly straight, okay? Because if it's off like this and you're going straight down the road, or off like this and you're going straight down the road, we need to know that, because once we jack this up and put our lines around the tires, let it back down and let the vehicle roll forward to relax the suspension, we're going to want the steering wheel somewhere in the same orientation as it is driving up and down the street, all right? That should assure that your wheels are as straight ahead as they can be. Okay, because now if we know that the steering wheel's off one way or the other and we got to make tie rod in adjustments, what that'll do is let us decide which side of the truck to make the adjustment on to bring the steering wheel back straight. Okay, so that's why it's important to know if your steering wheel is one way or the other when you're rolling forward. Okay, now one thing to keep in mind, there's many ways of doing this. Whether you use a string method from the front to the back or however you do it, there's a lot of ways to get your toe in close. Now, this is not as accurate as any alignment machine would be, but this will get you in the ballpark. Okay, now that we got this jacked up, I only jacked the one side up because it was easier on this truck for me just to jack one up. You can do both if you want. All we're doing is trying to make a reference line. You could measure tire grooves, you know, side to side, but the problem with that is most tires will have a little bit of run out, so you might not actually get a perfect measurement. So what I like to do is I like to get me a piece of chalk, a crayon, anything to make a mark on the tire. I like to hold it right there, okay, so it doesn't move, and then you just spin the tire around. And this ought to give you a straight mark to measure off of all the way around the tire, alright? We'll go a little more. Okay. I know that's going to be faint and you can't hardly see that. But now, if I make this mark on the tire, spinning it around, and a mark on that tire, theoretically I should have 2 points around the tire that's equal with no run out, no movement. Now, you're never going to be exact, but you'll be really close this way, all right? So now what we're going to do is let the vehicle down. Now, you don't have to do this step. You can do it with the valve stem or whatever. I like to make a mark. That tells me where my tire started out, all right? And I'm going to go do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I just want to make a mark. Okay? So now that'll be all we need for our chalk for now. And as you can see, I have the line around this tire also. Okay, I'm not exactly sure if you can see me or not here what I'm doing, but we had the car jacked up and we put it back down, alright? Now, to actually get the suspension to relax and all the components to relax like they would be normally, the reason I put the mark on the wheel is I want to roll this truck forward now. I want to go at the minimum of 1 revolution on that tire. 2 wouldn't hurt you, okay? So here's what we're going to do. And at this point also, try to make it so that your tires, as you're pulling up, try to make sure your tires are pointing straight ahead. Okay, now when we rolled this vehicle forward, the steering wheel was fairly straight and this vehicle's tractor went fairly straight, okay? Now, if you know that when you're driving the truck or whatever and you know the wheel's off a little bit one way or the other and you know that's straight, that would be one thing that when you do your roll up, you'd want your steering wheel to be kind of in the position it is naturally driving down the street. So if it's off to one side or the other, let it roll when you roll it forward with the steering wheel in that position. Okay, now I've slid a 4x4 up against the tire here, okay? This is going to be the height we're going to take all of our measurements off of. All of our measurements are going to come off the height of a 4x4. It doesn't have to be a 4x4. I'm just using this because that's what I have there. Now, with me being here by myself doing this, I'm going to take the edge of this 4x4 and I'm going to line it up with the outside of my mark that I made around the tire. That way it gives me somewhere to hook the tape measure, and when I go across the other side and pull, I'll know I have it tight. Okay? If you have a second person, they can hold the tape measure here, but always try to measure off of something to the same height. That way you're not up or down and changing your dimension. And you want to be in the same height when you measure the front as you do when you measure the back, so it's just a good thing to use something like a 4x4 or a brick or just whatever you have laying around, as long as you got 2 of them the same height. Okay, now that I'm here and I got my tape measure, and you want to use a good thicker tape measure so you don't get no sag. What we're going to do is hook that block, and then we're going to come over here and we're going to take a measurement. And to the outside of my line right here, I have 68 inches exact, alright? So you can either remember that measurement or you can jot that down. But we have 68 inches from the outside of the mark to the outside of the mark. Okay, now my next step is, I'm going to want to go behind the front tires and I want to put that same board on the same side here. On this side I'm going to line my mark up. Okay, here you can see now. I want to line my mark up with the edge of that 2x4 on the same side I did before, okay? On the same side of the line and everything. Okay, so we're going to measure across here. It was 68 in the front. Okay. And if we come back here and measure to that line, a touch over 68 and an eighth, so we're like everything but 68 and 3/16 is what we are here. So I'm going to call that good because it should have some toe end, so when you're going down the road again, you know, it spreads that out. Here's the tie rod end on this truck, okay? If I had to adjust the toe end in or out, I would do it with these tie rod ends. Either it'd be the driver's side tie rod end or the passenger. That would depend on where my steering wheel was. That's part of the reason that when we rolled the truck forward and tried to make it go straight, we tried to make the steering wheel like it was going up and down the highway. That way if we have to adjust, we can try to straighten the steering wheel out some. Now once we've loosened these up, we want to take the weight off the wheel and make our adjustment. You can measure and kind of guesstimate on the tire, you know, if you got to go an eighth or a quarter or whatever your measurement said you had to go. Once you get that done, you're going to want to let the weight back down on the ground, and then you're going to want to do the roll the vehicle forward at least one turn of the wheel so that you can relax the suspension and get everything back where it belongs. And then you'll check it again with the boards measuring it, and you'll do that until you get it right. Okay, so even good tie rod ends and stuff, there's a little bit of play. Okay, it doesn't. You got ball joints, tie rod ends. You got numerous moving parts. Also, flex. Some tie rod ends in different places are bent a little bit. You'll always have a little bit of flex there. That's why the toe end should be set in a little bit or out, depending on whatever the manufacturer recommendations are. And a lot of that depends on whether the tie rod ends are in front or the back of the front, you know, axle. It's all on design. But the reason that is whenever you go up and down the highway, those tires actually spread till all the play gets out of all the stuff, and the tie rod ends, ball joints, or whatever you have. Even if they're brand new, they'll have a little bit of movement in them. And that's why they do the toe in, so that when you're going down the road and the tires will actually be running straight and true.